Good evening, and thanks for joining tonight's conversation about autism, talking to your kids about their diagnosis of autism. We will begin shortly. Good evening. Thanks for joining tonight's conversation about autism. Tonight they'll be talking to your kids about their diagnosis of autism. We'll begin shortly.
Greetings and welcome to Conversations About Autism. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jennifer Mannheim. I'm your host tonight, and I work as a nurse practitioner at Seattle Children's Autism Center. Tonight, I'm going to welcome back some of our participants who actually sparked this conversation, talking to your child about their diagnosis of autism. And through this, I'm going to tell you about how this came about. But what I want you to know is at the end of one of our conversations about autism broadcast back in March 2022, we stuck around a little bit to talk about how it went. And two of our participants had a conversation that led to this conversation tonight, discussing the diagnosis of autism with your child. But before I get too far ahead of myself, I want to introduce our panelists to you tonight. Let's bring them on. Here they are. Jen Gerdts, why don't you start first and introduce yourself?
Glad to. Thank you for having me, Jen. I'm Jen Gerdts. I am a clinical psychologist at the Children's Autism Center, and I'm also on faculty in the School of Medicine, Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at UW. Very glad to be here tonight.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jen. And Ashanti, do you want to go next?
Yes, hello everyone, and thank you, Jennifer, again for inviting me. I am Ashanti Proctor. I am the very proud parent of my son, Assan, who you will meet later in this live stream segment. I'm just really happy to be here, and I'm really excited about this topic that we talked about, Jennifer, a year ago. Thank you, everyone.
A year ago. We're bringing it all back. Thanks for joining us tonight. And we also have Ben. You want to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, Ben?
Hi. Hello, everybody. My name is Ben Moore. I work at the at Children's Hospital, the Alyssa Burnett Adult Life Center in Bothell, and I am also part of the faculty for University of Washington Land.
Excellent. Yes, Ben. Happy you were able to join us here tonight too. And all right, so I appreciate, so tonight we're talking about this journey of sharing a diagnosis of autism with your child. And Ashanti was part of that conversation back in March 2022, together with another person who you'll see on video briefly, Tariq. And I want to appreciate that this journey of having this conversation with your child is difficult, or can be difficult actually, but it's different. That's mainly what I wanted to say, is that it's different for every family. Both for the caregiver sharing the news, as well as the person with autism or the autistic person who's hearing it. And I appreciate the stories that you guys are willing to share with us tonight so that we can learn from you. And I encourage anyone listening tonight who has a question or would like to share, please do so in the comments. If we have time, we hope to get to some of those questions. I also want to point out that there is no wrong or right way to do this, as long as it's done from a place of love and compassion. And I'm also pleased that we have Dr. Gerdts with us tonight here to also talk us through the process of that and her experience in doing it as a clinician, and then also kind of helping us understand how there's been some efforts over the years to really reduce the stigma of autism so that sharing it is actually comes from a different place. So, all right. So first we'll start off kind of with the conversation or the question that prompted this conversation. And so going back, I remember, Ashanti, you asked Tariq something like, do you remember how old you are when you knew you had autism? It was something like that, right?
Yes, I was just very intrigued by him. I met him through this live segment topic. I do not remember the topic last year, but I was so intrigued by him. I was so intrigued by his story and just him as a person and how he delivered. And he just seemed like he was an open book for a person like me while, he was sharing his story. And I just remember I was just like, I wanted to know, like, how old were you? If you're able to share your story now as an adult and, how old were you when you found out you were autistic, and what was that like for you? And he shared it with us, and it was just nothing for him because at that point in my life, I had not shared with my son, who was 11 then, he's 12 now. And so I had not shared with my son. And actually, almost 3 months ago is the first time I shared. It almost took a year, ladies and gentlemen. If you have a child with autism, just like we had to share about COVID and all of the many things of it and how we can prevent getting it or what it is and why we have to quarantine, we had to do it. And so I knew that I would have to tell my son someday. But Tariq,
Yeah.
his story, that video, that day, I felt something in me. He just felt like a part of my family. He felt like something that I've gone through, or he knew he would be able to identify.
Yeah.
And I asked him, and he shared, and he just made me feel like it would be okay.
Yeah.
It would be okay because, like you said, as long as it's coming from a place of love, let's go. Let's do it.
Well, luckily tonight, he recorded a short little video for us. So you get a little prelude to kind of what led to that. And so where he talks a little bit about that conversation, and it's a recording. And so I think we can play that now, and it'll explain itself.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us. Yeah, the evening when you guys are watching this. Unfortunately, I am not able to make it, but I believe T is here. It's weird talking about myself in the future. Anyway, this is Tariq Carmi Jones. Say hi, bud.
Hi.
He is a 20. I think he is here. 25. So you're 24 now. 24-year-old autistic self-advocate, limited verbal. I've been working as a support for Tariq for 10 years now. 10 years next month. So I will be reading his answers to these questions. Yeah, so here it goes. Do you remember how old you were when you found out that you knew you had autism, and what do you remember? I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I was young. I was always very involved in the process, and my parents were always completely open and honest with me. I remember knowing I was different than other kids, especially with my speech being so limited. I also remember wanting an explanation for me being the way that I was, or am, and some hopefulness to progress socially, and as I got to progress socially when I was young, and progress academically as well as I got older. Who told you, and what was that like for you that you had autism? Were you happy, sad, confused, or maybe something else? Like I said, my parents were always just open and honest, and when I got an autism diagnosis, they just told me as if it was no big deal from what I remember. And we were just going to move forward with all the supports that I needed, all the early intervention, speech pathologists, and ABA, and I was just always involved in it. I was happy that I had a group to identify with, a group that has shared a lot of the same characteristics, struggles, and as an overall explanation that our brains all just fire differently, but we still very much have our own individuality, completely unique to us. Share a little bit about how you feel about having autism now. At this stage in my life, it's just part of who I am. I have overcome a lot, and I am always still working on progressing even farther. My goals never stop. When one is accomplished, there are more lined up right after that. Working on progressing my independence and life skills are my top priorities still these days. Not as much academia, which as many struggles as there are still a lot of positives as well, and I'm very, very happy with my life. Yeah, that is what he had to say. Thank you for having us. Hope you all have a great night. Let's say bye. Okay.
Excellent. Yes. And so for those of you who haven't met or seen Tariq before, I encourage you, I think we might put it into the chat or the comments, the link to the video with both Ashanti and Tariq back in March 2022. So you can learn a little bit more about him. He's an amazing individual who's overcome a lot. And one of my best stories is, or that he's told, his best stories he's told is that when it took him 10 years to learn to ride a bike, but he figured it out and did it. And I will also say that he types his responses, and then Morgan often reads for him. But all those words are his own words that Morgan was reading. All right, so Ashanti, back to kind of talking a little bit more about your journey. And, you're saying about 3 months ago, started sharing this information with Assan. I know it was triggered by something that happened at school. But can you tell us a little bit about how you went about sharing with Assan and what you did to prepare yourself, like how that went?
Yeah. So, Assan is my first child. I also have a daughter who's 3 years younger than Assan, and she is a typical learner. And so Assan being my firstborn, I met Jennifer Mannheim, Nurse Mannheim, when Assan was two and a half. And so she can attest that I've just been a very hands-on person. I've got to figure it out. I got to know. I need to know where, who, speech therapy, which, where, how. I've just been that parent. I've always been going, and I've always been trying to figure it out. And I always wanted my son to excel and have a chance at every and anything that he deserves. And so last year, asked the question, and it had just been on me. Okay, well, when do I tell him? I'm going to tell him, but when and how? So Assan is 6th grade. As you guys know, that's middle school. And, I was like, well, should I tell him before or should I? And I didn't know how to, the right time when. So, but one thing is, I've used the term autism a lot. I've used it a lot. I know my son has heard it. I know he has heard conversations, but we just never had the talk. Middle school has been a huge adjustment for us. And there was an incident that occurred in middle school. Maybe this will be the next topic, Jennifer, bullying, because it's a thing. And especially when you're a child like Assan, who was in general education with push in, pull out services, bullying is seriously a thing. But in that incident, I had to tell Assan. And I remember the day. I said, this is it. This is it. I have to just tell him. And I grabbed both of my kids, and they know when we sit down on the floor, crisscross applesauce, that is a time of listening to mom from the soul and from the heart. Sometimes we even have our talking stick. And so I just basically, I needed help. I was alone, but I was ready and I was nervous. So I started a clip on YouTube. My son has always loved Sesame Street. And even though he's 12 now, he still loves it, but he loves it in a different way. Assan has done arts film camps. We do film camps twice a year. Right now, his obsession or whatever with Sesame Street has pushed him more to how can he be the videographer and make his own YouTube videos. That's where he is now. So I pulled up a YouTube video about Julia, the autistic character on Sesame Street. And it was a 10-minute clip. And I just let it play. I let Big Bird and Snuffleupagus and them do their thing. And we met Julia. And, basically the theme was how she's different. And that word and that theme is what I went with when the video ended. And so we're all on the floor. And I just said to them, we're all different. I said, I'm different, you're different, you're different. She's a girl, you're a boy. I just talked about our differences. You're a little dark skinned, I'm a little light complected. I started very general. I started with talking about how my son is an amazing student. He has a 3.5 GPA. And I just started talking about his strengths. I wanted to bring the strengths out because I didn't want him to feel less than. I would like to back up and say that maybe 5 or 6 years prior, I had tried to tell my kids. I started with my daughter. She was way young, but we all knew my son was different. And she started crying when I told her that my son was different. And, I just talked about the anatomy of, his brain being different. And she cried. And I think in that moment, I knew, I can't, I was scared. Maybe I was a little stunted. But back to our circle, excuse me. I'm just telling them their differences. And I stopped on my son and I said, Assan, you are autistic. You have autism. And I said, what that means is you were born in a way to where You learn differently. You process differently than everyone. I said, but everyone in your class is different. And so that was the theme. That was the motif of just being different. And again, I praised his strengths, and I praised how much I loved him. And at that moment, when I was done, maybe 20 minutes later, I said, "How do you feel?" And he said, "Good." And I said, "Okay." I said, you are not less than, you are not dumb, you are not stupid, you are not any of these terms, that other children may abuse those terms. That is not you. So anytime someone ever wants to tell you something that is negative, you just tell them your strengths. You're in the band at your school. You play drums. You're on the swim team. You have a 3.5 GPA, and your mother and your father truly love you. Tell them to call me. And that was it. That was it. We hugged. We had kumbaya. I still to this day, I will ask him, do you know that you're autistic, or do you know about autism? And he'll say, yeah. But I just don't know if it matters to him yet, because I protected him with unconditional love his whole life, to where he never really felt different within my household and with any setting that I ever placed him in. So.
Well, I know you are an amazing mom, and thank you for sharing that part of your journey. I know you're going to bring him on, so if you want to call him over, but thank you for sharing that part of your journey, and you've started it, right? You've started that conversation, which was the hardest. Assan is joining us here. Hi, Assan. Thanks for joining us. Yay, look at you. All right. Did you hear your mom talking a moment ago? Did you hear her sharing a story? No, you're a different place. All right. Well, Assan, do you remember your mom telling you that you had autism? Do you remember that?
Yes. Speak up, honey. Yes.
Oh, yeah, we hear you. We hear you loud and clear. It's good. You're doing great. How did that feel? Do you remember how that felt when your mom told you you had autism? Do you remember if it made you happy or sad?
It made me happy.
It made you happy. Awesome. Have you shared that news with any of your friends, Assan? Have you told any of your friends?
No.
No. All right. All right. So I got one more big question for you here.
Yeah.
That's all right. You're doing good, bud. What do you like best? What do you like best about having autism? What do you think is good about it? Can you think of something good? It's kind of a hard question.
Because you're different?
Because I'm different.
Tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll do this. What is your favorite class in school?
Miss Armstrong's class.
What
Yeah,
class?
what class? Yeah.
What
class is that? Miss Armstrong, what does she teach you? She teach you math, or is she teaching you reading?
Speak loud.
Elastics.
It's life skills.
Oh, okay, yeah, excellent. And why do you like her? Is she nice, or is she
nice?
She's nice. Awesome.
She's also his swim and liaison.
Yeah. I heard that you are a swimmer and you are a musician. What instrument is it that you play?
Drums.
Name
drums.
The djembe, snare drums, bass drums, the timpani.
Wow. Wow, that's impressive. You have a lot of amazing skills. Yeah. Great. Is there anything else you want to tell us? I won't keep you too long because I know you are so brave for joining us here tonight. You're like the youngest person who's joined us so far. So you're like, that's pretty awesome. Yes. Anything else you want to tell us, or are you ready to go?
Ready to go.
Ready to go.
Well, he's
All right.
ready to go, but you want to share with maybe some other children listening who maybe have autism like you, and just tell them that it's okay to be what?
Be different.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
be good.
okay to be different,
All right.
and it's okay to be yourself, right? Yeah.
Assan, you're awesome, man. I'm so glad you joined us tonight, and you are totally free to go. Bye, man. Bye. Or you can stick around too, but that's up for you. That's for you to decide.
Did you guys see me plugging in the laptop? That was going good.
No worries, man. That's real life. We are having a real life conversation, so it's all good. It's all good. All right. Well, I am going to turn it over to Ben for a little bit here. And similar to what Assan was going through, Ben, I'm curious for you, if you remember how old you were when you found out you had autism.
Let's see. I want to say it was like second grade when I first heard about it, but back then it wasn't really autism, it was pervasive developmental disorder.
Oh, yeah.
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 Early 90s, yeah. So, yeah, one night, our parents were telling us stories like about when we were younger, and my mom was just saying how well, the doctors thought I would be like a vegetable because I was born like premature and stuff. Now I wouldn't do this, I wouldn't do that. How I had a developmental disorder called pervasive developmental disorder, and then I'm like, okay, you know,
Yeah.
like yeah, I was like 6 or 7 at the time, maybe. It's like I don't even know what those words mean. Like
Yeah.
I knew what like ADHD and autism were, even though autism was relatively new, because that's around when the DSM-4 came out. And I used to read a lot of medical textbooks when I was a little kid. Uh, and so, but I didn't know what pervasive developmental disorder was. And I didn't really question it. I didn't really think about it because, I was, for the most part, I was mainstreamed. I had like a few speech therapy classes a week, a few sessions with the school psychologist for troubling behaviors. But otherwise, I was in general ed with my brothers, and so back then it was just more like I hadn't like an IEP and stuff, but it was for my blindness, which didn't really help, no, because they were gonna actually, accommodate me, which was pretty sad, but that's for another time. But yeah, I mean that's the pervasive mental disorder. That's the first time that I heard about it, and then in 8th grade, there was this uh, other kid in my class, and the school nurse came in, and when he wasn't in there, and explained like how he had like this form of autism called Asperger's, and like I think my face was just like turning red because everyone's like, "Why is your face red, Ben?" Like I don't know, but I can truly tell. I'm like, yeah, this totally like sounds like me, and then like I didn't know it was really like the same thing, and then like I guess in high school was when I got the diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome, and when I was going through a really rough time and I was in the mental hospital, they diagnosed me with Asperger's and ADHD, and then in like 2007, I I go to where I go now for therapy and medication management, and they're just like, okay, it's just autism spectrum disorder. So that's my journey with that.
Well, you've had the full array of diagnoses all under that umbrella of autism spectrum disorder. That's impressive, and thank you also for sharing all of those details. Everyone's journey is different, but I think yours is powerful and probably pretty true for a lot of people, hopefully watching or listening to this. And so how do you feel about that now? Like, how does that, having a diagnosis of autism now, or being an autistic person, like, how does that feel for you now? I guess it's kind of a broad question.
Yeah, it is, but I don't know. It's like I can't not think about it because that's my careers. I mean, that's what I focus on, So I used to think of it as like, especially when I was getting into when I was getting out of elementary school, like 6th grade, and into middle school, and then throughout middle school and high school, I thought that it meant I was stupid, and I thought it meant that I was the R word and all that like bad negative stuff. And that really impacted my self-esteem. But I had brothers, my two brothers, who thankfully, in their own ways, taught me, hey, you don't do this. This is what you did wrong. This is why all my friends and us are making fun of you, and this is how you're going to change it so we don't make fun of you anymore. And I didn't really care enough to want to change like until college. And then I'm like, hey, I want to socialize more. I want to like learn how to be better socially, and because I feel like that's going to get me farther in life than if I'm just all blunt and stuff. So I practiced really hard from when I was like 17 to probably like 21 to learn how social cues were and everything. And then we have all these, probably starting in around 2013. We have like Square Pigs meetups and like all these other like sites dedicated to autistic people, forums and all that. And then like at that point, I'm thinking, okay, it's just like something else I have, but like it doesn't really, I mean, this is how it makes life harder, but this is how I manage it. So I don't really think of it as like a good or a bad. There's certainly some unique things about it. I'm glad that I can focus on special interests of mine when I can focus for a good amount of time. A lot of people can't say that. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. Thank you also for sharing all those other details of kind of how you've grown since that time, and some of it hard, some of it good. How even sometimes things are hard, but they can also, like your brother giving you honest feedback, can be hard, but also probably in some ways helped a little bit too, because he's probably a person who loved you and was trying to help.
Very helpful.
Yeah. Well, now I'm going to turn a little bit to Jen Gerdts, Dr. Gerdts, and we'll come back to Ashanti and Ben in just a little bit here. But Jen, first of all, I'm so glad you're here to share your experience in telling people of various ages and levels of autism that they have autism. But before we talk about sharing the diagnosis too much, I do want to start off with acknowledging the efforts of the neurodiversity movement that started in the late 1990s and early 2000s. And maybe you can tell us just a little bit about the neurodiversity movement and the impact it's had on the acceptance of autism and how it's kind of helped change the way we view it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it's so telling the order that we are going through the panel too, of starting with autistics and hearing that perspective and talking with families, because that kind of mirrors a bit about how the neurodiversity movement emerged in the first place. I was like 15 years ago, if we did something like this, in all likelihood, you just would have been talking to me and I would have been telling you, okay, this is how you tell your child that they have autism. And I would have said they have autism. I would never have said that they are autistic. All of this has changed dramatically in the past 10, 15 years. And it corresponds completely with the neurodiversity movement, which is the way that I kind of wrap my head around it. And I'd love to hear from Ben about kind of his experience of it. But the way that I've wrapped my head around it is the neurodiversity movement is basically that all brains are different. There's diversity in how our brains work. And just like there's diversity in how we look and are as people, just like our personalities are diverse, just like our heights are different, from one another, there's diversity in how brains function and how brains work. And each brain is different. And it would be so boring if all brains were the same. So the neurodiversity adds to kind of who we are as humans, and comes at it from a really strengths-based perspective too, of like, what do you bring to the table? What kind of great things does your brain do? And then, as Ben was saying, like, what are some of the challenges and supports that your brain, your body, your person needs? So it's really kind of celebrating and recognizing the differences in how brains work and operate. Yeah, that's how I understand it. Does that feel right, Ben? Because you live and breathe it. You could teach it probably.
I probably could teach it. I am. Well, the neurodiversity movement started right around 1999. This autistic and multiply disabled rights activist, their name is Jim Sinclair. They published an essay online called "Do Not Mourn for Us," and basically it went through and said, hey, like, we're people who have like different differences, like how our brains are and how we were born, and like it's just natural variation. It's not wrong, it's not right, it's just different, and it contributes to the progression of humanity. And so it from there, there's a lot of overlap because the neurodiversity movement, isn't just autism. It's related disorders like ADHD. Some would say bipolar. Some would say schizophrenia. It just depends on who you ask. But as far as I know, it's mostly just confined to stuff like autism spectrum disorder and ADHD. But everything else, yeah, you're pretty spot on.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben.
Good. You got the okay from Ben. That's good. Yeah, exactly. So Jen, back to kind of your clinical experience as a psychologist and sharing with families after an evaluation that their child is autistic. And I know the conversation can be different when you're having it of the parents of like a toddler, of a small 2-year-old, versus if you're having that conversation with an older individual who can actually be a part of the conversation. So thinking about those families when the child's actually pretty young and isn't able to be a part of the conversation and hear so much about it. So it's really had with the parents. So for the caregivers of those young kids, do you feel like it's too young for them to start the conversation when they're younger? Or how do you, let me think, I'm thinking of this question as we're saying it, but just thinking about how, what you might say to parents as to like sharing that diagnosis with their kid, and when would you recommend to start that conversation?
Mm-hmm. We have this conversation all the time. And again, I just want to point out too how different that is from like 10, 15 years ago, where that was not part of the conversation. You did not, that was not one of the topics that we covered in our kind of feedback appointments where we were sharing the news with the family. The child may have been running around the room, but often not. Often they were somewhere else. And this was not part of the conversation. Now, and this is honestly thanks to so much of the work that autistic advocates have done. It's changed me as a clinician personally about how I integrate this kind of concept of identity formation, even with littles, like even with like 2-3-year-olds. We're not talking about doing it now, but just planting the seed that this is important to be thinking about in the coming years about how you are going to share this diagnosis with your child. And starting, I'd say, a 2-year-old, that's hard. They are, not going to have the kind of developmental ability to even know what that is. But what you can do is start to plant the seed that there are there's differences in how brains work. Just like there's differences in, colors of skin and colors of eyes and different, languages that people speak across the world. Just kind of promoting and embracing differences in humans, so that when you're starting to think about differences in how brains work or neurodiversity, this is not the concept of differences is not new for them, and celebrating differences, being open and interested and curious about differences instead of kind of different equals bad. That is something that I really do try to say with parents of young children when we're giving a first-time diagnosis, is that autism has these different patterns of behavior, and they are different. They are not bad. They are just patterns that are different, and different does not equal bad. I say in pretty much every diagnostic appointment. I just did that this morning. Was just differences are there. Different does not mean bad, and that kind of you can start that lesson really early on with all sorts of different ways to talk about that and have conversations with preschoolers. And then certainly as they start to get older and they're starting to watch, I loved, Ashanti, that you brought up Sesame Street. There are more characters out there in media, in, the world today that have differences and that are, labeled as autistic and have autism. So kids are hearing about it. I can't, so many times when we're doing a feedback with a child that's a little bit older, not 2 or 3, but like maybe school age, they have heard autism before. They wonder, why am I coming to an autism center? Like they're putting 2 and 2 together, but they have heard the word autism before. Maybe they have a friend or a family member, or they've watched a show where the character has autism. So it's not totally new, thank goodness, anymore to society and to kids that are hearing about it and wondering about it maybe in themselves.
Excellent, Jen. I totally agree with you. Oh, Ashanti, I'm sorry. Thought I heard someone chiming in. Maybe it's the vacuum behind me here. The cleaning crew is here cleaning up after us. But I did want to share some resources that we kind of put together a little bit. Maybe Linnea, if you can start those slides. I think this might be a good time just to share them real quick. So first of all, I wanted to point out there is this webinar that's happening that the University of Washington is hosting and is led by Dr. Sarah Woods from the University of Washington. And you can either, if you've got your phone, because you're on your computer, you can get this QR code, or we will also put the link in the chat. But you do register for it, but it is next week, same time, and it's on a webinar, and there's a live Q&A after you've watched the video. So I want to put that out there as another resource if you're on this journey and feel like you could use a little more support in doing that. And there will be not only Dr. Woods, but some other autistic advocates as well who are part of the conversation. These other 2 resources here, this first one are books and websites for talking to your children about autism. If you click on that QR code or go to the Seattle Children's Autism Center website under Living with Autism, or Patient and Family Resources, Living with Autism, and then Talking to Your Child About Autism. We've put together a book list based on age, and we couldn't put every book in there because there's so many books, but it's a way to kind of get started in looking at some of those things, and we have them by age. And then there's also this wonderful article that was written by Dr. Woods for Parent Map, and you can click on that QR or can scan that QR code, or we'll also put that link in the chat with 13 tips for talking to your child about their autism. It's also a really great resource. And then I have one more resource on here, this next one, that our very own Jen Gerdts, together with an amazing community autistic advocate, Ivanova Smith, that they did together for Nathan Hale High School about autism. And Jennifer has a great conversation with Ivan over there, and Ivanova sharing about kind of having autism in high school and what that was like. So I didn't have a QR code for this one. I tried to, but if you type in some of these words, Seattle Children's Presents Coping 101 Autism, or go to this website, or type in that website, you should be able to find it. And we will also put the link in the chat too. So we can put those resources down, but I just wanted to give you a few other little tidbits for those of you parents who are listening, and you might be in the same boat and you're thinking about how you might be doing this conversation with someone you love. And so again, if you have any comments or questions, I encourage you to put those into this chat, and I can ask this expert panel who's with me today. It's funny when you do opposite, like trying to do, anyways, you know who they are, you see them. So I want to go back to Ashanti and ask if there is anything more you'd like to add or share with caregivers and things you went through that you think might be helpful for other moms and dads or caregivers.
Yes, thank you. And Dr. Gerdts, thank you for that. You know, this neurodiversity movement, you know, it's something that even myself, I'm understanding it more now, you know, to the parent who has been in my shoes or is in my shoes. I've been just sitting here thinking and taking it all in. And I just say that I'm not going to say I wish, because I can't turn back the hands of time, right? And life is good for my children and I, but I wish I could have started this earlier. I wish I think for me in my journey, with Assan being my first child and all I ever wanted was motherhood, I think, and I did take counseling with the Seattle Autism Children's, with the Autism Center. But I think what may have kind of prolonged it for me is that I was in a mindset of I wanted my child to be the difference. I wanted him to be the exception, so bad. I wanted him to be, I'm not going to say normal, but I wanted him to be the, I didn't want autism at that time to be his identity. And I think that is not good. And so because I became involved and because I, you know, began to surround myself with professionals and speech pathologists and occupational therapists, and it became a part of my life. And that is where I got understanding and acceptance. And so I sheltered Assan. I sheltered him from the sharing and the real hardcore explanation. And so if I could go back, which we know I can't, but if I could give some advice to any parents out there, it's plant those seeds, like Dr. Gerdts said. Plant them, talk about it, even if they don't understand it. Plant them firmly and water them with the best water that you have, you know, because eventually it will sprout and it will come up, and they will want to know more about self and be on this self-exploration discovery, and, you know, and so that's my gist. That's how I feel that when I asked Tariq the question, I really was I was lost, or I didn't know. I didn't know how to, because I had sheltered Assan so much. But I knew the day would come. And so here we are. And now I'm really pushing Assan into this neurodiversity movement as well, because it's a thing, and it's a very important. And I just think, planting those seeds will help them further along to where, they'll be able to understand it for themselves, in addition to you coaching and prompting and trying to make them understand it for themselves. So does that?
Oh, it totally does. And I will say, I know Assan, and he is exceptional. This dude is an amazing speller, way above his age, and it's impressive. And we all have some of these gifts, and he definitely has multiple gifts. So he is exceptional. And Ashanti, I will also say, I've known you for many years now, and I know how above and beyond you've gone to always try to do. Like, you've done stuff like, working with you, all the paperwork and things, so you could leave work in the middle of the day to get your son to the speech therapy that he needed, and like above and beyond. And you've done your best. And I think I myself, just like Dr. Jen Gerdts is saying, I've also learned how to talk more about it and to be better about helping families. So 10 years ago, I wasn't as good about helping parents know how to do that. And so we're all learning together. And I think, again, just doing this from this place of like trying to love one another and love ourselves, and figure out how to love ourselves. And, as a mom, you're teaching him how to do that. And I know you also are working to teach him other stuff, like taking care of himself and, getting good grades and all those other things as parents do. So thank you for sharing that, the honesty of it, because we're all learning, we're all getting there.
Thank you for letting me share.
Yes. And Ben, I'm wondering what you have, your own thoughts about what advice you might give parents who might be watching this and thinking about it. Any other thoughts you might have about how they might go about it, or things they might share, or what do you think?
It's a complex issue all around. I mean, I listen to parents who, some of them are like, yeah, it was really easy to tell my kid that they're autistic. And then there's other parents who are like, I haven't told them that they're autistic because I don't want them to be bullied, or I don't want them to put a label on them, or I don't want them to feel different, you know, um, or, just fear the unknown. It's, I can't really say either way what a parent should do, because I haven't been in that situation, but I can see um, that both reasons are valid for both wanting to share the diagnosis with the child as soon as possible, and then not wanting to share that information. But I will say that I don't think it's ever a good thing if a child finds out on their own by looking through medical records or some other means, and then they come to their parents and they're like, well, you knew, and the parents are like, yeah, we knew. Well, why'd you tell me? Well, because, and then that could lead to, and I've seen this, it leads sometimes to resentment, and that can be a terribly lasting thing. So I guess what I'd say for converts is, as a parent, do what you feel is right, but I think it's always better to err on the side of caution and find a way to tell them at their grade level.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben, and all of you. We've got about 8 more minutes, which is just a great amount of time to kind of just open it here again. If there's others who do have questions, I encourage you to ask those in the comments. I will say one thing that I have learned, what's helped me learn the most, is having interacted with autistics like you, Ben, and others. Luckily, in my career, I've had the opportunity to do that. First of all, I love my job and I love working with autistic people because they constantly challenge my view of how I see things, because they notice things that I didn't, and then they point them out, and it's like so obvious afterwards. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I had that opportunity. But some of it has also been understanding the power of coming to better understand yourself and acknowledge that there are many people, you're not alone, and there are other people who no one just like you, but there are people who might have similarities, so you're not alone in that regard. So sometimes I think what helps is exactly what happened with Ashanti, was meeting Tariq and meeting another autistic adult and going like, oh wow, like he's so awesome. Assan's come back in. Excellent. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And then you guys feel free to unmute too. Everyone's being so polite with their mute. I think that's one good thing that we've learned from the pandemic, is how to mute and unmute. But yeah, if there's any other bits of information that anyone would like to share, or a story, or if Assan has something he'd like to say.
Would you like to say?
No pressure, dude. No pressure. I just think it's cool you came back to join us.
Yeah. we really appreciate you, Jennifer. We really do. I mean, anytime there's something going on in our life, I know I can always email, and you will send us the tools. And that is something that we just know. I remember you sent me those links. And I remember the parent write-up, the parent map, or whatever link that was. I looked at that right before I shared the news with Assan. I think it was the 13 things to say to your child. I just appreciate all the tools and the resources that you have given us, and you understand, because this is real. This is real life.
Oh yeah. And kids don't, I've said this before, kids don't come with instruction manuals. There's not like this, press this button and then enter this code and it all, works. Instead, it's way more complicated and way more wonderful than that. And I'll say, similar to what Jen Gerdts was talking about, when kids come to the Autism Center, there's already something up, right? And so I often start off as like, well, do you know why you're here? And it's amazing how many times the kids are like, I don't know. And the parents are like, we talked about it in the car. And the kids are like, I don't know. And that makes total sense, right? Because these are these like terms, we're using like medical kinds of terms. It doesn't always make sense. And even you may have met one person with autism, and so that's the vision you have in your head, but we know there's a full spectrum, right? And so sometimes it's important to help individuals understand the spectrum of it and the diversity of it. And I'm glad that this diversity movement is happening, and I've learned a lot from it. But often, I ask kids like what they think about that diagnosis for them and how does that feel? And some kids are like, it's awesome, like, yay. This makes so much sense. Glad to be a part of the club kind of response. And then I have some of them who are just like, not sure, they're not quite there yet. And I think that also reflects the diversity of how we live in this world and how we see ourselves. And but I am also grateful that a lot of the stigma. So I have the pleasure of meeting people from around the world who've come to this country or have lived here a while, but come from different backgrounds. And so culturally, sometimes in different cultures, autism is still viewed in a very different way. And so within that person's family, there might be very different connotations. And so a lot of what we're having to do is reframe it. And I feel like the US and UK and some European countries are a little further along in how it's talked about and how it's celebrated, as opposed to in some countries where it's still kind of kept behind closed doors, and people aren't sharing that as much. So when we're talking about it, it can really come across in different ways. And no way is right or wrong. It's just we're all different journeys. So yeah, I don't know if anyone else has. We've got 2 more minutes, but I see some. Shamar, my world. Let's I don't know if we can share that comment there, but that's beautiful. Thank you. My world is better because of autistic people. I have hope in humanity because of autistic people. Yes. And I also liked your comment earlier. Water with love, as Ashanti was talking about those seeds and planting and watering. And great.
I hope that Assan he'll get to that place of acceptance and understanding, like Tariq is at, and Ben, my panel mate. Right now, I think we're in the middle in terms of understanding and total acceptance. So it's a journey.
It's a journey. Yeah, I think we're all learning to accept ourselves in different ways, in different in who we are. So, all right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. I want to thank those who are watching or watching this video live or later on. Thank you for sticking with it and hearing these amazing stories. I hope those resources come in handy. Feel free to share them. And also, there's other conversations happening, especially this month. If you're watching later on, this is April, which is Autism Acceptance Month, World Autism Month. Yes, so we appreciate all of you and wish you good night. Thank you.